I'm going to explain to you a tool called ADB, or Android Debug Bridge, today. It's a very critical tool when you develop apps for Android. It's critical because it allows you to run commands or perform operations on your Android devices, Android phones or tablets that are otherwise impossible on your graphical user interface, on your normal Android user interface. It gives you access to the command line, to the so-called command line or terminal or console, or whichever phrase or terminology you like to use. In order to show you what you can do, I've got a phone here for you. It's a Google Pixel 4 XL. It's relatively a new device, but what I'm going to show you here is actually applicable to most Android devices if they're not too old. The operations should look the same. The way you are going to follow my instructions today is that I've got a setup here. If I show you, I'm going to minimize my video for a minute. I have a Linux system setup which is connected to my Android phone, and I'm going to actually use a tool called AirDrop to show you exactly what I'm doing on the Android phone itself. This also is connected to my Android phone directly. Let me just give you an example of what kind of stuff you can do with ADB before we continue on how you can set it up. I've got this Linux system ready and connected to the phone via a USB cable. You can see if I type ADB shell, it actually gives me access to my Android phone. I can then type in all sorts of commands on the Android phone itself. Notice this is not actually running on my Linux system anymore. This is command, for example, listing all the files, or there are commands such as a screen cap, which would start taking a screen capture of the screen. So these commands are actually run on the phone itself. Now, this is one of those things that you don't get access to normally when you don't have this Android Debug Bridge set up. As an example of what kinds of stuff you can do that might be otherwise impossible on your normal user interface, I've got an app downloaded from the internet on my system, on my Linux system. It's called Remote VNC Server. It's one of the it's the kind of app that I'm using for example, communicating with this AirDrop application to show you the Android. In order to install this app, I actually did not install the app via the standard Google Play or the Google Play Store. What I did was I actually came to my Linux system, connected my phone via the USB cable that I have, and I've typed ADB install name of the app. As you can see, if I press enter, it starts actually installing this app, which I downloaded from the internet, or which I could have built myself on my system, and it installs the app and it reports back that the installation was successful. So now if I actually show you on the phone itself, you can see that there is a new app. This is the app that I've just installed. Now I don't want to continue using this app. I just want to show you how to set up ADB, and that's what I'm going to do. Let me actually bring up my video again, because I would actually like to show you the setup one more time. I've got a phone here I am using to connect this phone to my PC, to my Linux PC. And by the way, these instructions apply to Mac, Linux, and PC, as well as any system that actually can support a typical Linux executable file. So what I'm going to show you here is obviously using the Linux today, but ADB does exist for Windows as well as for Mac. So you can actually install ADB on your Mac or on your Linux system or on your Windows system, and perform the same operations on those systems as well. If you are curious to find out a little bit more, you can actually type ADB Android Debug Bridge onto the Google search box, and it gives you a bunch of explanations of very detailed explanations of what this tool is, what it does, how you can use it, and I'll explain later how you can actually install the tool on your own platforms. So I've just plugged in the phone onto my PC. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you how to start enabling the debug bridge on your phone. So as you can see, the phone here, you have to unlock the screen, go to the apps, and then find the settings app. And from there, hopefully you will see something like the system if your Android device is not very different. And under the system tab, you can see developer options. Now, if you can't find developer options, it's probably because you haven't enabled it, and the way to enable a developer option on an Android device is normally going to About Phone and tapping multiple times on the build number. Sometimes this is actually under a different option. For example, your Android version could be the one where you go to Android version and you tap on the kernel version multiple times or the build number multiple times. But in my phone, it's actually the build number, and it's telling us that no need to do this anymore because I'm already a developer, or I've already enabled the developer mode on this system, on this phone. So back to system, I go to developer options and search for USB debugging under the debugging section. Now on your phone, if you've never done this before, it would be switched off, but if you tap on the button here, it will switch it on for you. First, it will warn you that it's intended for development purposes only, and it can be harmful if you really don't know what you're doing with it. But for our video, we tap on OK and start using the phone in developer mode. Now, when you do that, the next step is to actually enable the use of ADB on your Linux system or Windows or Mac. The way I do it on Linux is I use sudo ADB devices. When I type this command, firstly, sudo means that it's going to give you access to administrator powers on this system, because access to a USB device can be restricted to administrators, and therefore we need the sudo command to make sure that the ADB has access to the USB connections on the system. And when you type devices, it might ask you for password because of the sudo. So I've typed my password, my administrator password, and now you can see that a device is listed. This is going back to our USB connection, is actually the device that I just connected to this Linux box. If you have multiple devices, you will see multiple devices all listed under the ADB devices command. So having a device, it actually means that you can access ADB shell. Note that once I have done the devices command once, I don't need to type sudo anymore, because ADB actually starts a so-called server on your system, and that server keeps running and it gives access to ordinary users. So it's not limited to administrator users anymore after running the server once, which is what I'm doing here. So I've typed ADB shell, it's giving me access to the ADB shell or the Android command line. You can type exit to come out of it, go back to your system, and then you can actually use ADB for all sorts of purposes. For example, if you type ADB help, it will give you a long list of what kinds of stuff you can actually do with your ADB tool. So one of the more interesting debugging strategies actually for Android developers is using ADB logcat. What it gives you is essentially a long list of commands or events actually happening on your system. So if I type this, you can see that there is basically essentially an endless list of events happening. And as I use my phone, you can see on this side, as I use my phone, as I perform different operations on the phone, you can see the events. The internal events are actually being printed out on the ADB logcat. So that's it. In case you cannot see the ADB devices, you cannot see your device. There might be a number of issues with your system. Possibly you might need to install a driver. On Windows systems, you normally need to install a driver, which means your Windows system will be able to actually understand what kind of device is connected via the USB cable. On a Linux system, fortunately, it normally works out of the box. You don't need to install extra drivers for any Android phones. And quickly showing you how to actually install this tool. Well, if you go to the download section of Android Studio, which is your complete IDE or integrated development environment for developing Android apps, ADB is installed as part of your Android Studio installation. An alternative, which is a smaller and lighter and perhaps quicker, is called the Android Platform Tools. It's just a package, a part of the bigger Android Studio, and you can just find your platform under the download section of the platform tools. For example, if you're on a Windows system, you just download the Windows package, and it will install all sorts of tools, including the ADB for you on your system. Just make sure that when you have installed the tool, you have ADB, the executable, on your execution path. This is what I've done here. If I show you on a Linux system, you can see that the path to where I installed the tools is actually on my path environment variable, which means if I type ADB, it actually does find the tool on the system. If I don't include the installation path on my path environment variable, the system won't be able to find the ADB tool, and therefore I would need to type the full path to access the tool. So that's it. I have explained a little bit what ADB is, where you can find the tool to download and install, and what kinds of stuff you can do with it. I hope you enjoyed it. We could perhaps continue with telling you some debugging strategies or some specific commands that you can perform on your ADB shell. Have a good day. Bye.